Podsters, I'm starting today with a question for you, and I really want you to think about this. Are you free? Do you feel free? Do you truly feel free in your life? The reason I'm asking this is because my guest today, Samantha Parker, stopped me in my tracks, literally stopped me from what I was doing when she went public with a very painful, very personal, and very poignant journey for her and her decision to get sober and her decision to do this publicly. The reason why I'm asking you about how you feel about freedom is because the feeling that Samantha talks about and the power that comes with really being vulnerable, with, of course, being afraid of being judged, but doing it anyway, with blowing off the peer pressure and the societal norms and all the BS that you've been told your whole life, the freedom that comes when you stop buffering and you sit with yourself and all the things that come along with that is an incredible feeling. And I couldn't wait. I booked Samantha immediately after I listened to her podcast episode and heard her story. And I knew I had to bring her on. So here we are. She is here. We're going to take it away with Samantha Parker. And we are going to talk about the incredible freedom that comes with being truly vulnerable. Here we go, Podsters. Buckle up. Are you ready to speak up, stand out, and get your seat at the table? If so, you're in the right place. Welcome to Unmute Yourself, the podcast where you'll get real life anecdotes and actionable tools for you to step into your strengths, debunk imposter syndrome, truly know your worth, and show up like you own the room every time. I'm your host, Nancy Medoff, who did the thing and followed my passion for empowering women like you to unleash that inner spark and become who you know you are meant to be. I'm a diehard foodie with a raging Skittles habit who will not stop until women everywhere unmute themselves and truly thrive at work, at home, or wherever you may be. Let's do this. Podsters, before we get started, I'm jumping in here because this community, my Podsters, my ride or die, the OGs, you have been with me for 2 years, and I want to make sure that you are the first to hear about and take advantage of my Do the Thing retreat that's happening November 5th and 6th. Yes, one of those is election day. You can get an absentee ballot and come do the thing with 4 other like-minded women and me in beautiful Naples, Florida. Here's what this is. This is the way for you to actually do this thing that has been on your mind. Could be months, could be years. This could be something like speaking on stage, launching a podcast, writing a book, switching careers, telling your boss to take this job and shove it, making your side hustle your full-time gig, stepping into your next chapter of your life, your retirement, your career pivot, whatever the case may be. I have done all of these things. And more importantly, I have coached thousands of women to do the same. And trust me, Podsters, when I tell you, this life that you think is on the other side of this thing, this life that you see other women living that you think might be available for you, it is. You simply have to do the thing. 2.5 days, 2 nights. It's a combination of one-on-one coaching with me, masterminding with, again, this small group of like-minded women. These are hand-chosen attendees, all of whom are high achievers, power women that simply need a little bit of time and a little bit of space away from their lives to sit down and actually do the thing. Most importantly, you are going to walk away with the tactical plan for how to do the thing. This retreat is not about sitting around and visioning and talking about the life that we want. Yes, we will do a little bit about that. This is about, okay, what's the tactical plan for how I will do it? Take my experience, all of these experiences I've had, the experience from the other women in the room, the coaching tools, the years of honing my craft. All of this is available to you, 2.5 days. Link is in the show notes. Sign up now. It's going to sell out very quickly because it's very, very small. I hope to see you there because I know what is on the other side of this thing for you. Podsters, it's time to just do the thing. Hey, Podsters, I am back, and I am back with a repeat guest, the one, the only, the Samantha Parker. Hello, Samantha.
Hey, Nancy. Thanks for having me back.
Samantha's waving. You couldn't see that, Podsters. We are, oh, although we are on YouTube, so people will see, so you can wave.
Yeah.
So I'm going to have Samantha introduce herself in a second. And before I do that, here's what we're going to talk about. Samantha is a social media manager extraordinaire. We are not talking about social media today. We might talk a little bit about social media. What we are talking about is really being truly authentic. And as you know, Podsters, this is a hot button for me. It is something that's important to me. And it's also something that I think a lot of people strive for and phone it in and think they're being authentic when they are really not. So, Samantha, tell us a little bit about you and what you do and who you are before we get into it.
Yeah. Well, I think the Samantha Parker really just like puts the pin in it. There is only one, the one and only. But yeah, basically, I mean, I'm a lady. I'm like, where do I want to go with this? So I've been a social media manager for 10 years, but I think that there's so much more to me. And now I'm like contemplating all my life. So thank you, Nancy. But I am also a podcast host. I love creating content and like sharing little pieces of my soul online. So that's like a big part of who I am as well. And, I'm a mom. I have two kids. I'm currently in the stage of, I have a 19-year-old where she's like fumbling through childhood, but like adulthood, I'm like, that's a stage they should prepare you for. And then I have a 13-year-old son who's pretty hilarious as well. I love to run. I have a corgi. I feel like that's very like significant. I have two chickens. I had a bunch of fish, and this tragic thing happened the other day where I accidentally killed them all, and it's been horrible. But I have a cat. We've adopted a cat that's on the way.
Are you a little bit of a nester? Are you like nesting? Are you having some kind of a midlife crisis where you're, I don't know. Do you have eggs from these chickens? Because I remember you talking about the chickens.
Yeah, yeah. We have eggs. They're fun. I love my chickens. Well, we moved like last year, and now we have like more space, and so we have like a huge garden. I have tons of fruit trees.
Mm.
My grapes just came on. I mean, when I say tons, like seriously, you guys, I have like peaches, pears, apples, plums, nectarines, pomegranates, and we have artichokes. I have tons and tons of grapes. Big garden. I just pulled a bunch of carrots last night.
This is crazy. You have a lot of animals and a lot of fruits. I love it.
I
Um,
know. I think a lot of people don't realize that about me is like I'm just like chilling in my yard. I love to go camping.
so do pomegranates grow on trees or in the ground?
No, they grow on trees. Well, it's kind of I would say it's more of like a large bush.
Like a shrub?
Yeah, but I mean it's big.
Huh, cool. Who
Yeah.
knew? And you have a husband, do you not?
Oh, I do. I am married. My husband just retired from the US military. So we're
He
kind of adjusting to that.
retired?
Just from the military, yes. So he's always had a civilian job, but yeah.
That's exciting. Very cool. So he's around now more, correct?
Yes, we're
Yep.
adjusting.
Got it. Okay, got it. All right. So, Podsters, there's a reason why I wanted Samantha to come on and talk about being authentic, which to me means allowing yourself to be vulnerable. If I were to say, if I were to ask myself, what's the definition of authenticity? It's being who you are, even when it's very uncomfortable. And, a lot of people wear authenticity like a badge of honor. And I like that. At the same time, I think if you're not willing to really be vulnerable, then you don't get to step into that authenticity. And it's very, very, very scary. Anybody who's ever been on a stage, anybody who has ever put themselves out there publicly, it is rough. So Samantha just did something that made me literally stop in my tracks. She teased a podcast episode, and I remember this was a couple weeks ago, probably, and I'll link to this episode in the show notes. And I remember that morning I laced up, I downloaded it, I went out for a walk for the sole purpose of listening to this podcast. So tell us a little bit about what led up to this big reveal. What was the reveal? What led up to it? And what was the outcome? That's a lot. That's probably going to take us like 30 minutes to talk about. But give a little background or a little context, because I think this is really important.
Yeah, and I also feel like very like humbled when you say like you laced up and you were like, I'm gonna listen
I
to this
did.
episode. So I feel like I'm doing something right?
Yeah.
But the episode I decided to call it Hungover. And That was the title of it. And my podcast editor, usually she'll like SEO stuff. And I was like, I just wanted to say hungover. And what it led up to was essentially me confessing what I felt like was something I've been battling with since I was 17 years old, and that is alcoholism. And I just like put it all out there. But, in true bravery fashion, I guess like it's scary to be brave. And a lot of times, we're on these platforms, we feel like it's solo, it's like just the Samantha Parker show, which is literally the name of my podcast. But I had a friend who had recently posted online that she was going through a sober journey, and we're totally different parts of the spectrum. But I reached out to her and I was like kind of mad at her. It was so funny. I told her, I was like, this is so triggering. Like I opened up my Instagram app. I had just had like a major, I'm going to air quote it, call it like an episode with alcohol. I don't know what you call it. A lot of times people call it benders, whatever. And so I'd opened up the app and she had just posted a reel where she's like, I'm just choosing not to drink because it doesn't feel good in my body. And I was like, this bitch. So I got her to do a podcast episode with me where I talked about being triggered, and then I just laid it all out on the line. And I shared a lot of things that I had never, ever shared before. And you know what's been really wild is people have messaged me and they're like, that is crazy, the things you went through. And I said, well, think about the things I chose not to share too. Like there's some more wild stories that have to do with my binge drinking. And it was a lot. It was really a lot to put myself out there in that way. In fact, when you listen to the podcast, I'm like, I don't like this conversation. And my entire body was like just screaming at me. And I had to do the brave thing. I had to just like rip the Band-Aid off. I felt like I was coming out of the closet, because I had been talking with someone and I was like, I'm just really high functioning. Like I will get up in the morning, hungover, go for a run. Like I am still completely like living a successful life. I just feel like I don't have control over the substance in my life. It was a lot.
So, okay. Tell me about your decision to announce this or to share this. And I don't like the word announce because then it makes it sound like, look at me. So you made the decision to go to AA, and what made you decide to do an episode about it?
So it's really hard for me to be on social media and share like the things that like maybe people say I should share. Does that make sense? So, I'm a social media manager, but like just talking about social media on social media is like, please put a gun to my head. There's like so much more to this dynamic of a person that I am. And I think that we've really, really put ourselves in boxes sometimes where you're like, you have to have this niche and you can only talk about this thing. And so while I'll continue to show up, like air quoting as I'm supposed to, it just doesn't feel right. Like I feel like a liar. Like I felt like I was walking around like a liar for 5 weeks with like this dirty secret that I had gotten sober, like chose to go sober, and that I was working through all of these things, which I think it was okay to delay it because obviously like mentally I needed to like process and, compartmentalize, for lack of a better word, so that I could verbally share it. But to me, like, I think if you're only sharing like bits and pieces of yourself, and especially if it's only the sparkly ones, I'm like, you're a fucking liar. And I don't know how you can get up every day without feeling that way. That's how I am.
I'm I'm nodding my head, Podster. So for me, it's about connection, human connection. And I don't want perfect. And, it's interesting because I used to look at all these influencers or whoever, and I'd be like, oh, I want their life. I want their life. Now I see this stuff and I'm like, they are so full of it. Like nobody wakes up looking like that. Nobody wakes up, I want to see a picture, or I've seen it. Beyonce, no makeup on, looking like a mess. You know, that's to me that I'm going to connect with that more than I am Queen Bee on the stage or Queen Bey on the stage. So tell me about the fear. What were you afraid of? What were you afraid would happen when you went public with this information?
Yeah. And this was something I was working through with, my alcoholism journey, was that I was going to lose all my friends and family, and that everybody would be really mad at me. That was honestly my biggest fear. I was like, my family's going to be mad at me because a lot of times they don't want to look at, some of their own issues. And I was like, I'm going to lose like some of the people that are closest to me. And luckily, like, I'm glad I've really developed a good like circle of support for myself. And that doesn't necessarily mean people either, just like I'm learning the tools, to work through these things. But, and then I kind of thought to myself too, I was like, if, and so I don't really give a shit if they're mad at me. And I was like running through everyone. I was like, it could be my mom, it could be, my cousins, my best friends. And I was like, I just don't give a shit. This is about me and no one else. And it's probably one of the most selfish things I've done. Like, and I think it's fucking amazing. So if people can't love me at my worst, they don't deserve to know me at my best.
Yeah, I agree. If you're not going to love, if you're not going to accept all of me, you don't get any of me. That's what I say. And you said it's the best thing you ever did. So, or I think you just said something like that. So tell me about that. What's different now that you stepped into this chapter of your life? What's different?
Well, the thing is it's still actually really hard because from the time that I was 17, I used alcohol to numb and I used alcohol to be like almost like medication for the things I was going through, which should have been, replaced with lots of therapy. But I did go to therapy a lot. But, alcohol wasn't the answer because ultimately it caused more trauma that now I have to like unpack. So I wouldn't say, in my head, I kind of had this like glory thought, right? I was like, God will be like, Samantha, you are blessed. And you would like, like rainbows and kittens. And it's not like that. It's actually still a lot. I went to dinner last night with my husband and I was like struggling to sit in that chair. And, he's like, what's going on? And I'm like, I just want to leave. Like, I need to get out of here. I want to leave. And so I'm having to like discover like healthy ways to just be present versus normally I would have just drank 3 or 4 glasses of wine.
Why did you want to leave? Because you were tempted or because you were having a conversation you didn't like or because like why'd you want to leave?
Because because that's a great question. It's just like the anxiety of my body where I'm like, I don't like this. I don't want to be here. I don't understand why he's talking to me. I don't understand why these people are talking. And it's all these things that I've literally just numbed out from. So I'm having to be like, okay, why do you want to leave, Samantha? And like really having to look at myself in the fucking mirror.
Mm, mm. That's going to be a long process. That's going to be long because this is like years, right? Years in the making, or years of buffering
Mhm.
and years of escaping or numbing, or I like the term buffering because it kind of buffers me from the outside world or whatever. There's a lot of stuff that you got to face now. Not you one. So you mentioned on your podcast, you have all this free time now. Well, not all this free time, but you have all this renewed energy. And you're like, oh, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this. And eventually, I think eventually when there's less newness and all of this energy or time, then you have to sit with your thoughts. And that's brutal. And sometimes like
Yeah.
brutal.
And that's kind of where I'm at right now is I'm like, well, I have to sit with like my actual real thoughts. And even on Sunday, like we just need to sit down and like we do like a little CEO meeting together, and the anxiety around that, where I was like, well, I wish we could just have drinks or we could be hungover today. So we would just watch movies and not worry about it?
Yeah. Yeah. So tell me about your community because you have a pretty big following and I would imagine that your DMs blew up after this podcast.
Yes, and my text messages. And one of my other fears too with coming out with this, and I've gotten a little bit about already, well, a lot of it is I do live in Utah in a highly Mormon community. So that some of my family is Mormon. And, I've already gotten, like right now, I have my cute aunt texting me who is 90. She's my great aunt, and that she's praying for me every day. And I'm like, so I called my uncle and I was like, does she think I'm like a drug addict on the street, And he's like, she prays for me every day too. He's like,
Hey,
been
I
sober
take
for
it.
20
I'll take
years.
it. I'll take it.
Yeah. So I also like, it's been hard because I feared the judgment from the Mormons. They're like, oh, I knew she'd break, or something like that when you grow up in a highly religious community. So I am getting that. And that's been a lot. But the people that have reached out to me that were kind of in a similar position to me, it has been amazing. And I already know several girls who are like, I'm done drinking too. And I'm like, wow, that's really cool. Even my mom texted me and said, I think I need to look at my own drinking habits as well. And I said, it's just something I didn't want to take into my 40s because I'll be 40 next year. And my mom, she'll turn 60 next year. And she was like, I don't think I should take this into my 60s. And so it was like kind of a cool bonding conversation.
I'd be interested to see in my circle how many people would come along with me if I made that decision. I don't think there would be. I don't think there would be many. But you never know.
And again, there's been like we went camping with my brother-in-law and my sister-in-law, and they're super nice people. So again, it's like what I'm having to notice is this is about me. This is so about me. But we go camping, and camping is a drinking sport. And she got out the bottle of Pinnacle vodka. Never offered me any because I think they're aware of what like I'm doing of my sobriety. And so there's also been things that I've had to work through like that. And it had nothing to do with her. She was just making herself a drink. The girl had one drink and went to bed. And I was like, this bitch, that is impressive,
Well,
but I had to like just take.
So this is interesting because there are people out there, they walk among us who can have one cocktail and then be done. That is very hard for me. That is very hard for me.
Which turns out that's my husband as well. He's like, yeah.
Yeah.
I can't have one cocktail and be done. I'm 2-3 bottles.
Yeah. So I remember when I was, I don't know, maybe 10, 20 years ago, maybe somebody said, you're either on or you're off. So I'm either drinking or I'm not. Like so, it's interesting because for those of you that are listening that you're one of those people that can have a, glass of wine and then that's all. I think it's important that you know that not everybody is wired like that. Or not everybody is wired like that. Like I have one glass and it is a battle in my head not to have another one. It like I have to specifically and consciously remove myself from the situation, remove myself from the table or whatever, just because of, you could say nurture, you could say nature, you could say genes, you could say whatever. But at the end of the day, it's not as easy for everybody. So I think and I don't think a lot of people know that. I think a lot of people are just like, same thing with overeating. A lot of people are like, well, just, stop when you're full. Okay, well, if it was that easy, nobody would be overweight. Everybody would be at a weight that's appropriate for their body. But anyway, I digress. That's not the topic of this podcast. The topic of this podcast is
no, but I think that's a really, really important thing to say though, Nancy, is that everyone is on a different path. And so, it's like you really need to understand if you do have like the issues that I have or what Nancy's describing, find people who understand it, because the only time I've ever heard anyone talk like me was when I started going to AA, and I found a really great women's group I go to. It's a closed group. I love it. So you don't have to go do like the big AA thing if you don't want to. But listening to those other women, I'm like, oh my fucking God, like I'm not crazy.
It's true. I mean, it's something. So there's also, I don't know if I talked to you about this. Have you heard the term sober curious? Did I leave you a message about this?
I am very familiar with that term. Yeah.
Okay.
That was my first attempt at getting sober, was being sober curious.
So I don't know if you read her book. Ruby Warrington wrote a great book. I think it's called Sober Curious, actually. And it's hilarious and also very powerful. And for her, it's what it is I can control it, but it's alcohol is having a negative effect on my life. And I want to change that. Like it's not, I'm at the bottom of a bottle. I don't like how drinking is showing up in my life. And I want to kind of explore the idea of maybe not drinking as much as I do. I think it's genius. It's actually called moderation. There's actually groups called moderation management when it comes to alcohol. I know this because I talked to somebody about it years ago. It's an association. It's interesting. So it's not like I can't drink at all or I'm not drinking at all. It's I need to control my drinking and I need to have a rational, logical, supportive way to do that, which I also think is interesting. Again, I digress. So stepping into this and putting it out there. Do you feel different when you wake up in the morning? I don't mean physically because you're detoxing or because you don't have the toxins in your body. I mean, Like you did it. You did it. How does that feel?
It feels so good. And I actually feel like this is the first time I feel like the gloves are off. Anything I want to talk about, anything I want to share, I can fucking share it because I choose to. And I'm like, I think going through that was like a big, let's put this out there, let's see what happens. And then I went through, the judgment cycle, mostly of myself. And I'm like, dude, it's okay. Like, I don't fucking care, And I think sometimes you just have to like rip the band-aid off and do it.
Did you
But
lose
I
any?
mean, honestly, the word I would think of is freedom. Like I feel mentally and physically free.
Wow. Wow. And all you had to do was own your shit. That's all you had to do,
Hmm.
right?
Exactly.
Um,
Exactly that.
did you lose any friends? And I use air quotes.
No, not that I'm aware of.
I mean, that's the thing. As I was listening to your podcast, Podsters, this was such a great episode. I mean, literally, I was like, yes, girl. No. And I was having a reaction to everything you were talking about. And I remember thinking to myself, if you lose friends, that's on them, not you. And they weren't friends anyway. And I didn't think you would. I really didn't think you would because I know you and the people that are with you because you're you, not because you're party Samantha, but because you're Samantha.
Yeah. In fact, I went to lunch with one of my friends, Brian, and I sat down and I was like, I have something to tell you. And then I started crying. Like, and I'm talking full blown crying. And she was like, are you okay? And I was like, I've been sober for the last month and that's why I've been avoiding you and why I canceled our plans. And she was like, okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. So when you were trying to decide if you were when you were deciding to go public with this, so I remember you told me a story and you don't have to get into details about a few years ago, you were canceled like overnight on social media. You had thousands and thousands of followers. You put a post out there that was misunderstood and people came for you. So did this factor into your hesitation to share this new information?
Yeah, in fact, I have been very guarded. I used to be really out there on social media where I loved talking about it. I felt like it was like a personal journal per se. And I loved that I could connect with people on this deep level. And I felt like it was my responsibility. And then after that, I just didn't want to talk about anything. And I can see like the decline. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where I was like, not safe, not safe. But it's been fucking killing me inside. I think as even further along than me. And I think I can look to you as a great mentor where I'm like, I went through this and you're like, girl, I'll help you. Like, I think we have that responsibility to each other. And so it was fucking devastating to me, even if I wasn't admitting it, that I felt like I could no longer do that.
Yeah. Wow. I'm so blown away. I mean, I'm just so blown away. Like, how many followers do you have on your podcast? Do you know like how many followers you have on Instagram?
Instagram, I just checked this morning because my Instagram finally started growing again. So I have 14,000, close to 700.
Okay. Can we get mine up to 14,000? Side note, that'd be great.
Let's do it.
Okay. I have to give it more than 2 weeks. So 14,000 followers. You probably had like what, 40,000 or something before that. You had a ton.
No, I had 16,000, but then remember this was like 4 years ago.
Right.
I think I went down to close to 10,000. Yeah.
Yeah. So imagine Podsters, your deepest, darkest, dirty little secret, and you go public in front of 14,000 people. That takes pure guts. I mean, that to me is the definition of authentic. It's publicly owning your stuff, your shit, your everything. And I mean, you just did it to do it because you felt that you were not being real. You felt like a liar, you felt like a fake, and you were like, that's it. I'm coming clean. I love it. I love it. I love it. If you had it to do over again, would you do anything differently?
I don't think so. And I know people get scared. They're like, oh, what about, my mom or what about like my Aunt Joni or you know what I'm saying? And it is weird. It is weird to pick up your phone and get texts, specifically like I get a lot of texts from my uncle because he went through sobriety and like did rehab and stuff. Super awesome guy. He's fun as hell. But he's like, I just listened to your podcast. And I'm like, oh my fucking God. Cause on that podcast, I'm talking about being raped. I'm talking about like some stuff, some really dark stuff. And I'm like, oh, they just listened to that. And then, I just saw him this weekend and I'm like, and it's still the same, they still love me. So I think sometimes, we have like this alternate world we're living in where we think we have to show up one way. And then it turns out like people still fucking love us. And I think it's been a beautiful process for me.
I love it. I think that's beautiful. Any last thoughts on, excuse me, authenticity, getting sober? I don't know, anything that has to do with anything that we talked about.
Yeah, I think that you should look at yourself in the mirror. And if there's things that like aren't going right in your life, it's fucking on you, you know? I was trying to throw a lot of shit on my husband that I've had to look at and be like, oh, this was me. My husband hasn't, he's had like a couple drinks here and there. I was a major pusher. I'm like,
Yeah.
it's me. It was Taylor Swift, I'm the problem. It's me.
Yeah, I think so too. It's interesting because in my house, we catch ourselves when we start playing the blame game. And we'll say, we don't blame around here. We don't blame in this house. That's what we say. We say it with our grandkids. We say it with my stepson. We say it just me and Danny. It doesn't matter. We're not about blame here. And part of that is if I'm not blaming someone else, then I'm accepting my responsibility in it. And that as well is part of being authentic. Like you can't push your stuff off on someone else. There's only so long you can blame your parents for your problems or your childhood,
Oh my
right?
God. That too. That's why in that podcast, I said I'm not choosing to talk about like before 17 because I am now 39 and whatever the fuck childhood I went through, like that's on me now. Like that is on me.
Well, it's interesting. I read a quote or saw a quote somewhere about you have a choice when you're a grown up. You can either break the cycle or repeat the cycle, and the choice is yours. You either break it or you repeat it. That's it.
Yeah.
So I think that's interesting. So I want the podsters to get a takeaway tip. So podsters who want to show up more authentic on social media, what do you recommend? Because you're good about this. What?
I was like, get over yourself. You've got to get over yourself. And then so I've had a hard time with my TikTok. I've helped people get crazy amounts of views on TikTok. And I was like, I don't know why. I was like, I would do the TikTok, I would step out. I would do the in, out, in, out, in, out, because it's a massive visibility platform. And that I didn't realize what I was doing, but now I have some clarity, sober thoughts here. And so I was like, I've got to hold myself accountable. So just like yesterday, I posted that I'm doing a TikTok challenge group. And then I had a bizarre amount of people who have joined it. And I was like, oh, fuck, like there's no way I've told all these people that we're doing this TikTok challenge together and we're going to do it. And you know what else I also said? I was like, I only have 200 followers on TikTok, but like, I'm going to teach you everything I've taught some of my clients that have gotten millions of views on TikTok. But like, I'm building with you. And that's stuff that I haven't ever wanted to share with people. Like, oh, I only have 200 followers on TikTok. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. What group is that? Is that something people can sign up for if they want to get more acquainted with the TikTok?
Yeah, it's in my link in my bio, but it's just, you just drop your name in.
Just drop your name in the link. Follow along for more tips. So, do you know why I'm laughing about that?
Why?
Remember when you were doing my LinkedIn and you were like, follow along?
Oh, yes.
So Podsters, I have to tell you the story. So Samantha was managing my
LinkedIn, okay?
managing my LinkedIn for me for a little while. Queen of branding, queen of the TikTok, queen of Instagram, all that stuff. Not an expert on LinkedIn, which is fine. I knew that. Okay.
I told you that.
Right. She did. Great. I'm like, just do it anyway. So we go on LinkedIn and she posts some post. I don't remember what it was. And then she writes in the bottom, follow along for more tips.
Well, I was like, you said not to post a link. So I was like, well, what do you post at the bottom?
Oh, well, we think this is hilarious. If you're a LinkedIn user, I'm sure you understand that just didn't really resonate on LinkedIn. And it was so funny. I was laughing.
I would say it wouldn't resonate anywhere since like 2018, you know? Like, hello, subscribe and follow.
Yeah. Right. Link in bio. Okay. So get over yourself and just wasn't it girl just post the content? Wasn't that you?
Yes, and I have stickers because I'm like, just post the fucking content. And then okay, but then I swear to God, all this has happened since I decided to stop drinking. I was like, well, why don't I post the content?
That's so funny. I love it. I love it. I love it.
You should, in fact, you should go over to my TikTok and see what I posted yesterday. Cause I'm like, if it's not fun and I'm not laughing my ass off, like I don't want to do it, you know? Cause I think I'm funny. And so I posted this post and it was like things I would change if I was president. And it's so funny, but it popped off. And it's the very first one is like bring back $5 Little Caesars pizzas. Like
Pizza,
bring
pizza,
back the
pizza, pizza,
bring
right?
back the $5 hot and readies.
Pizza, pizza. Yeah. $5 footlong, John's footlongs. We have that here. What was I going to say to you? It was about TikTok. Oh, what's your handle on TikTok so the Podsters can go follow you?
Samantha Parker Show.
The Samantha Parker Show?
Just Samantha Parker Show. But if you search the Samantha Parker, it'll pop up.
Well, and your jazzercise video. So let me tell you something, Podsters. If you want to crack yourself up on the daily, go to Samantha's stories on Instagram or your reels. I don't even know what they are. She legit did a full-on jazzercise reincarnation and it was hilarious. Was that your friend? Who was that with you?
Yeah, that was my friend Jenny. You know what's funny is she's like a very well-known like therapist.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah. I'm
all
also
right.
pretty
So
funny in my-
Samantha,
I'm
where
funny
can
in my
people find-
stories too, guys.
what?
I'm funny in my stories too.
I know you're hilarious. Where can people find you?
That's Samantha Parker on Instagram. My website is thesamanthaparker.com.
And you do, sorry.
I live in St. George, Utah, if you're looking for me physically.
You want to talk about your group that's in Utah? Are you accepting new people?
Heck yeah. So we started her social club so that women could get together, create content. We also make a 30-day content plan that we give everyone. It's pretty badass. But we do meet every month in person. Sometimes we meet at a coffee shop. Sometimes we meet. Last month we did at a studio and we took photos. It was cool.
That's great. That's really great. I love that. I wish we had that here. I think that's really cool.
Well, I saw someone copied my model and they started one in California. And I was like, that's cool as hell.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I'm glad that you were happy for them because when somebody copies what I'm doing, like word for word, my initial reaction is to be angry. And then I'm like, whatever, there's plenty to go around. Like, I'm not going to get torqued up about this.
Well, yeah, because I don't want what they've created. Looked very like business professional luncheon where I needed to be a size 2 with heels on. You know, they had like the pop-up banner was taken. And I was like, oh, that's not what that's just not me. So I'm like, that's cool.
Yep. So how do we find out about her social club?
Her social club, stg.com. And you can go there, but you can join virtually or for our in-person group.
I love the virtual. So I want to make sure you caught that, Podsters. If you're wanting to build your social media presence, you can join this group virtually. I highly recommend. 2 thumbs up, 5 stars.
Yeah, it's super cool. So we had a virtual call yesterday and we go through the monthly content plan, but then I sit and tell you like how to apply this idea to your business, so it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Awesome. I love it. All right, Samantha Parker, the Samantha Parker. Thank you for sharing your journey and your vulnerability and your authenticity. And Podsters, for you, I would say, peace out. I will see you next week. That's a wrap, Podsters. And before we go, I ask you, what's one thing from today's episode that you will use this week to unmute yourself? DM me, email me, send a smoke signal, whatever you need to do. Let me know what you're going to do differently. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with someone you know and leave a 5-star review on Apple. This helps me spread our message of empowerment to more people worldwide. Let's do this.